6.5 Rethinking Science. Before you learn more about the challenges that postmodernists have posed to the discipline, it is important to devote some attention to philosophy of science. Science, as you have already learned, provided the foundation of modern science, social science, but then the very notion of the science has undergone a dramatic change in our times, and the philosophers of science have made us rethink science. No wonder this intense debate on the nature of science did have its impact on the philosophy of science. It is therefore important that you learn some meaningful about this debate. Let us begin with Karl Popper, a leading philosopher of science in the 20th century who changed our understanding of science and society. Popper grew up in Vienna, taught in New Zealand and England, encountered logical positivism and Marxism, and came forward with his distinctive idea of science. He was heavily influenced by the changes in physics that emerged out of Einstein's theory of relativity. It revealed that the Newtonian physics, which was dominant for more than 200 years, could be interrogated. This led him to plead for the relative character of science. Science is not something solid and stable or eternally valid. Instead, science for him is a set of conjecture subjects to falsification and refutation. No wonder, as Popper asserted, the creation of scientific status of theory is its falsifiability or refutability or testability. A theory which is not refutable by any conceivable event, he reminds us, is non-scientific. Contrary to the popular belief, irrefutability is not a virtue of science. The change confronting to the science community is not to search for confirmations, verifications of the existing theory, but to search for falsifications and refutation. It is not at all necessary to absolute or sanctity any particular source of knowledge, be it Baconian empirism or Cartesian rationality, and think that the knowledge gained through it is a domain of absolute certainty. This would lead to dogmatic thinking and generate a false belief that the world is full of verification of existing theory. Popper, however, critiqued this dogmatic thinking and argued that the science could progress only through an open culture promoting the spirit of refutability and falsibility. See below a quotation for Popper. So many answers to the questions, how do you know? What is the source of the or the basis of your assertion? What observations have led to you to it? Would be, I do not know. My assertion was merely a guess. Never mind the source, the sources from which it may spring. There are many possible sources, and I may not be aware half of them. And origins or pedigrees have in any case little burning bearing upon truth. But if you are interested in the problem which I tried to solve by my tentative assertion, you may help me by criticizing it as severely as you can. And if you can design some experiment test which you think might refute my assertion, I shall gladly and to the best of my power help you to refute it. It is only through this culture of critical rationalism that the science progress. Science is inherently critical and dogmatic and perpetually progressing through trial and error, conjunctures and refutations. But pseudoscience is dogmatic. It is too certain of its explanatory power. It seems only confirmations and verification. With this understanding of science, Popper critiqued logical positivism, determinism, and Marxism. For instance, Marxism, Popper alleged, is not genuinely interested in falsibility. Instead, it is dogmatic, desperately striving for confirmations and verification. Popper said, a Marxist would not open a newspaper without finding on any page confirming evidence of his interpretations of history, not only in views but also in its presentation, which revealed the class base of the paper, and especially, of course, in what the paper did not say. Moreover, Marxism as a doctrine of historicism, as Popper argued, is inclined to a large scale historical prophecies, but then The kind of prophecies which Marxism offers are, in their logical character, are more akin to those of the Old Testament than to those of modern physics. This sort of prophecies is possible only in a domain that is well isolated, stationary, and, recurrent, say the solar system. But unlike the solar system, human history cannot be separated from our deeds. Society, far from being perspective, is perpetually changing, evolving, and growing. The fact that we can predict eclipse does not, therefore, provide valid reason for explicating that we can predict revolutions. In other words, Karl Popper has have a new meaning to science. He sought to free science from positivistic certainties. Science from him is relative science is likely myth making, and what promotes science is not the arrogance emanating from the cognitive certainty, but a spirit of humbleness that encourages the possibility of falsifiability and refutability. Thomas Kuhn was yet another major philosopher of science who taught us about normal science and its inherent conservatism and extraordinary science leading to scientific revolution. From Kuhn, normal science relies on the centrality of the paradigm that a particular scientific community takes for granted. To use Kuhn's own words, paradigms are some accepted examples of actual scientific practice. Examples which include law, theory, application, and instrumentation, together that provide models from which arise particular coherent traditions of scientific research. A paradigm, in other words, provides the background and directs the trajectory of normal science. Its power lies in its ability to attract an enduring group of adherents away from competing modes of scientific activity. It was in this sense that Newton's Principia and optics, Franklin's electricity, and Einstein's theory of relativity acted as a paradigm after different junctures of scientific history. For Kuhn, normal science does not seek to refute, falsify, or interrogate the prevalent paradigm. Instead, it seeks to actualize the potential of the paradigm itself and resolve all residual ambiguities through further elaboration, experimentation, and fact gathering activities. Kuhn said, normal science consists in the actualizations of that promise, and actualization achieved by extending the knowledge of those facts that the paradigm display as particularly revealing by increasing the inherent in the extent of the match between those facts and the paradigm predictions, and by further articulation of the paradigm itself. Kuhn characterized this entire process as a puzzle solving activity. Thus, the reason is that the problem normal science investigates are more like puzzles that can be solved only through the rules provided by the paradigm itself. Whatever does not fit into the paradigm is kept aside. Kuhn elaborated, a paradigm can insulate the community from those socially important problems that are not reducible to the puzzle form because they cannot be stated in terms of conceptual and instrumental tools the paradigm supplies. One of the reasons why normal science seeks to progress so rapidly is that its practitioners concentrate on problems that only their own lack of ingenuity should keep them from solving. No wonder the certainty of the paradigm, the commitment to it, and its specificity give a concrete direction to science. It becomes a profession with its specific adherents and specialities, with its journals and publications. And paradoxically, it is this conservatism that leads to the cumulative progress of normal science. But then there are situations when the crisis anomaly begins to confront the scientific community. It may arise because of the persistent failure of normal science to make sense of the new phenomena. These crisis situations lead to extraordinary science. It is extraordinary because, unlike normal science, it acknowledges the crisis, interrogates the established paradigm, and dares to become innovative. Kuhn held, confronted with the anomaly or with crisis, scientists takes a different attitude towards existing paradigms, and the nature of their research changes accordingly. The proliferations of competing articulations, the willingness to try anything, the expression of explicit discontent, the resource to philosophy and to debate over fundamentals, all these are symptoms of a transition from normal to extraordinary research. And eventually, it is this extraordinary science that leads to a paradigm shift, resulting in scientific revolutions. It was the way the Einstein, to take a specific example, made a revolution in physics. The revolutionary or the new paradigm is incompatible with the earlier one. Indeed, Kuhn repeatedly emphasized on the incommensurability of paradigms. There are substantial differences between the successive paradigms. For instance, in one solutions are compounds, in other mixtures. One is embedded in a flat and other is curved matrix of space. The result is that the two groups of scientists see different things when they look from the same point in the same direction. It is not easy for a scientific community, as Kuhn reminded us, to accept the new paradigm because the massive conservationism, dogmatism characterizes the community of normal scientists. It is, however, important to realize that despite this resistance, the new paradigm succeeds in attracting more and more adherents and eventually establish its hegemony. The new paradigm appeals because it is said to be neater, more suitable, or simpler than the old. What are the implications of this understanding of science for us? Normal science, because of the centrality of the paradigm, is extremely focused. It is also narrow and conservative because it does not wish to see the beyond the paradigm. Things are, however, different in other creative fields. Like music, graphic arts, literature, and even the social sciences, the field that, unlike natural science, cannot be said to have a hegemonic paradigm to follow. No wonder is their fields learners are made aware of competing and often inconsumable approaches, and they must ultimately choose for themselves. As an example would make this difference clear. Students of physics working on optics would feel so confident about the dominant paradigm that they would find no reason to entertain any other competing theory. That is precisely what the success of a paradigm is all about, its ability to defeat all competing approaches. But imagine students of sociology working on religion. From them, there is no hegemonic paradigm. Instead, they are likely to be aware of the multiple competing and even incommensurable approaches to religion, says the Durkheimian, Weberian, and Marxist approaches. This makes social sciences more open-ended and fluid. Paul Fairband was another leading thinker who critiqued the hegemony of scientific method. No method, even most successful one for Fairband, has the right to subdue and marginalize other methods. No wonder he refuses to give his consent to scientists. That is, the belief that the science is the only valid form of knowledge. Instead, he reveals that politics of science, its relationship with power, and the way through propaganda and other strategies, it murdered all alternative forms of knowledge. Scientism, he insisted, would go against the true spirit of a democratic society because the democracy should imply the plurality of knowledge system, methods, and traditions of inquiry. Each tradition, each fairy tale, each story for Fairband has its validity. Nothing is dead or meaningless. It is important that we embrace an anarchist theory of knowledge, implying that everything is possible. You may be wondering why we are discussing so much the philosophy of science. If you think deeply, you would realize that it is meaningful for social science. There are two lessons that you can learn. Positivism that seeks to legitimize the certainty of scientific gets eroded. For Popper, science is like a conjuncture subject to refutations. For Kuhn, science is conservative and prevails because scientists too, like any other group of people, are being guided by peer group pressures and other socializing forces. And for Fairband, science has its own history of domination and violence. In other words, it speeds the process of delegitimation of the positivistic foundation of social science. 2. With the demystification of science, sociologists tend to become more sensitive to the plurality of methods and tradition. It requires the courage to come out of head of natural science. In order to fully grasp the argument presented above, let us come with reflections and action 6.2 and then proceed with the discussions on crisis in foundations of social sciences. Reflections and action 6.2. Science has the only legitimate explanation is coming under increasing criticism. While it is acknowledged that the science technology have made immense progress and have made efforts to solve many of human problems such as hunger and disease and have tamed to some extent the worth of the elements of nature, they have not been able to solve all human problems, questions, and search for meanings. This inability of science is one reason given for the increasing presence of religion in the everyday life of the people the world over. And if science is not the only legitimate explanatory avenue, then what are the alternatives? Some firm believers of Christianity contended that evolution is a fantasy that scientists and other secularists cling to because it's explained humankind through a process other than the God's divine hand. They wish the creation angle could be worked into the school of curriculum. However, as another possible explanation, it could even be presented as a theory. In the context of the above statements written, write the answers to the following questions on a separate sheet of paper. Questions. Do you think the rising religiosity among the people have anything to do with the fact that science does not answer all our questions and needs? Should we be offering an alternative explanation to understand the deeper questions of existence in our school curriculum as some Christians have argued it? What according to you is a proper explanation which is worth of being considered as a theory or as a part of social science discipline? Special note for counselor of for an activity during the counseling session. Please form a discussions group from the learner of Sociology at your study center and discuss the last questions in the group. Organize a debate on this topic and prepare a program for broadcasting by Gyanavani in collaboration with the GNO Regional Center in your area. 6.5 Crisis in Foundation. It is, however, the advent of post-modernity that has caused a severe crisis to the philosophic foundation of the social sciences. As you already know, that social science and sociology was a product of Enlightenment modernity. Its foundations lay its adherence to the scientific objectivity, its beliefs in reason and progress, and its acceptance of the supremacy of Western modernity. Post-modernity deconstructs all these foundations and asserts that there is no universal truth. There is no culture that can claim itself to be superior to another, and the world is a site of differences. In other words, the post-modernize, there is no grand truth on science, progress, and modernity. Instead, there are multiple voices, and the very notion of a rational, coherent subject is questioned. There are many reasons for the disillusionment with the project of modernity. The experience of war, violence, and totalitarianism in the 20th century, the growing assertions of the colonized people, and the reluctant decline in the legitimacy of stern power, the arousal of subaltern voices, the proliferation of new technologies of communication, and the rising consumer culture, making a distinction between high and low meaningless. All these factors, as you would learn, and led many sensitive thinkers in the West to rethink and interrogate the very foundation of modernity. The question is, what are its implications for sociology? In MSO 001, you would learn more about post and modernity. Nevertheless, it is not difficult to identify some implication as shown in box 6.3. Box 6.3 Implication of postmodernism for sociology. Sociology, for contrary to Marx, was heavily influenced by science. Its objectivity, its universality, and explanatory power. Hence, sociology was seen as a different form of ideology, narrative fiction, and metaphysics. Sociology as a science of society was thought to be a more objective and true, a piece of reliable knowledge. But then, for postmodernist, science has lost its sole claim to truth. Science itself is being seen as yet another narrative, a story, an ideology, and therefore science cannot be seen as the master narrative. There is no master truth, no totalizing theory. Instead, in this world of multivocality, there are diverse stories and truth. It is a world without consensus, without coherence, without meta theory. Hence, all these modern sociologists, with their totalizing claim, come the law of three stages: Durkheim's division of labor leading to organic solidarity, Weber's modernity as a widespread rationalization, and Marx's theory of class analysis lost their significance. And sociology became, to use Zygmunt Bauman's words, merely an act of translation of multiple traditions without any claim for legitimizing their grand truth. And as a science is being deprived of its validity claims, sociologists in the postmodern setting become free to play with the innumerable sources, narratives, life histories, fictions, popular drama, and music. Postmodernists questions the sanctity of the knowledge as an objective quest for truth. As Michael Foucault would argue, knowledge is never separated from power, and power from knowledge. For example, psychiatry can be seen as an integral component of a disciplinary society. With its notion of normalcy, it seeks to modulate, controls sexuality or madness. It is like formulating a concept like discourse that embodies knowledge as well as power and has a principle of exclusion and inclusion. Hence, we have a discourse on madness or sexuality that allows psychiatrists, doctors, and other normalizing judges to categorize people as a mad or sexually deviant. In other words, everything is constructed and there is no natural permanent truth. Furthermore, the idea of an emancipatory modern society gets challenged, and we are told about a disciplinary society characteristic by widespread network of surveillance machinery. Yet postmodernists have caused a severe critics. For them, there is no fundamental truth, as put forward by Bacon and Descartes, that can prove to be objective. There is no universal or totalizing theory like Marxism that can overcome local context and heterogeneity, and there is no superior method like science or positivism. Here is a situation, a typical postmodern condition leading to relativism, incoherence, and psychophonia. But then there are social scientists who do not give their consent to postmodernism. Even then, they see problems with modernity and science, and this debate goes on. As you progress, you will learn more about it and also participate in the debate. 6.6 Conclusion. In this unit, we have tried to understand the philosophical basis of the social science and how different epistemological and metaphysical issues dealt with in philosophy have had a bearing on various perspectives and methodologies of social sciences. As you can see from the discussion in this unit, there has been no single paradigm or theory which has dominated the social sciences, including sociology. Through sociology, we are influenced by natural science and its methodologies, especially in its early stages, in an attempt to establish itself as a discipline. It has realized that the subject matter of sociology involving it is human beings is not amenable to generalization and laws of Newtonian kind. With the discovery of increasingly different worldwide views and particularly cultures, it became difficult for sociologists to come up with a universal explanation. Even if they did, the same came under the heavy criticism. The increasing need to represent plurality has produced a new wave of critique, leading to a postmodernist polarization of many methods, and in the almost everything is acceptable. Further reading is given by Philip Derek L. Abandoning Method for a critique, the epistemological foundation of common research procedures. And from Poser, Louis A. Sociological Theory from Macmillan, London, for a general collection of key passages from classic writings in sociological theory. So this is the end of the unit 6. Thank you.